It's been a very busy and crazy night in the NHL after seeing one of the biggest blockbuster trades in several years. We'll discuss a little bit more of the aftermath of the Mikko Rantanen Marty Necas trade involving the Blackhawks on Taylor Hall as well. Plus, what's the latest on JT Miller and Elias Pettersson in Vancouver? How does the Rantanen-Necas trade affect those negotiations as well? Plus, is there any chance at all that Sidney Crosby could join fellow Nova Scotian and great buddy MacKinnon in Colorado? There's certainly some speculation kind of getting stirred up from Kevin Weeks suggesting that might be a possibility. Plus, we have the Islanders quarter-century teams, another signing in Long Island as well, plus some injury updates around the NHL. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to talk about today. It's been an extremely busy night. Of course, we got a blockbuster trade earlier this evening. This video is going to be pretty late going up on YouTube because of all the other news that's gone on tonight. But certainly want to take a look at some of the aftermath of that massive trade and some of the other news around the NHL for the rest of the day. So first up, let's start with a signing that we saw earlier today with the New York Islanders signing Tony Deangelo for the rest of the season at league minimum. Now, Tony Deangelo has bounced around with a bunch of NHL teams over the last number of years and actually started this year in the KHL playing in Russia. Now, because of that, he does require waivers. So the Islanders to sign Deangelo, they can sign him. He's on waivers though, so other NHL teams will have first right to kind of pluck him from the Islanders before he can officially be a part of their organization. So we'll see what happens here. I think there's a decent chance Deangelo clears and the Islanders will keep him. Obviously with long-term injuries right now to some of their defensemen, like Mike Riley's out long-term. They got Noah Dobson out. I think the Islanders are in a situation where they found an opportunity for a puck-moving defenseman to try to see if they can't salvage the season. They have won a few games here as of late, but still find themselves in a very tough spot when it comes to trying to climb over all the teams in the mix here for Eastern Conference playoffs. Clearly, there's a lot of teams kind of still bunched up in the standings there, so we'll see what kind of impact this has. Another big update on the injury front today. We found out a little bit more details on Jacob Markstrom in New Jersey. The timeline for Markstrom is about 4 to 6 weeks with a sprained knee. I believe it is an MCL sprain, so certainly could have been worse when you're dealing with the knee. You just never know. Certain parts that you can injure, like the ACL, take much longer for recovery. So this is a scenario where it's not great news, of course. You don't want to lose your starting goaltender for any length of time, but I think it's a type of injury that they should be able to deal with, especially in light of the break for the Four Nation Faceoff coming up. Now, of course, that means that for Markstrom, not only is he going to miss some time with the Devils, but it will also impact the Swedish team for the Four Nation tournament. Markstrom will need to be replaced, given the proximity of the timeline here for the tournament. It's believed that Flyers goalie Sammy Ersson will be asked to join the club to replace him on the roster, but it may not be the only move that Sweden needs to make in that front, because William Karlsson is now doubtful for the tournament, and we still don't have a clear-cut determination on whether or not Linus Ullmark will be able to play. And even if he does return to the Ottawa Senators here in the near future, which is kind of expected, will he be in a position where the team and he wants to go play in this tournament after just dealing with multiple injuries already this year? So we will see where things go on that front. Now, we also got the quarter-century teams today for the New York Islanders. We'll go over those two teams. Team 1 for the Isles include former captain and current Leaf John Tavares, Brock Nelson, and Josh Bailey. Complete your forward trio. Your back end is Nick Leddy and Adam Pelech, and Ilya Sorokin between the pipes. So lots of familiar names for the current roster there. Team 2 includes Matthew Barzal, current captain Anders Lee, and Frans Nielsen. A little surprise on Frans Nielsen. There's a few other names that I think could have maybe gone in that spot, but Nielsen gets the nod here. Ryan Pollock and Kenny Johnson on the back end, and Semyon Varlamov between the pipes. So again, both teams having a lot of flavor with the current roster. We'll be getting more teams here tomorrow. Now, looking at the aftermath and the fallout here of this blockbuster deal that we saw this evening, which caught a lot of people off guard. Now, we knew there was a possibility of a Mikko Rantanen trade. I don't think anybody's seen it coming this early, and I still think a lot of people thought that there was a better chance that things get worked out for Rantanen to stay with the Avalanche, and he would either, go on to be their own rental, and they would try to sign him before the free agent period in July 1, or he would find a way to extend and stay in Colorado. Well, obviously, the Avalanche got to a point where they felt there was no chance of that happening. The rumored asking price for Rantanen's contract is over $14 million. They set an internal budget of Nate MacKinnon's contract at $12.6. Yeah, Cale Makar is not too far away from needing a new deal. And in order for them to be able to, to keep those guys and also to ice a very competitive team, they just did not think they could go to $14 million on Rantanen. So when it became clear that he wasn't backing down on his demands, they decided a trade was the better way to go. Now, when it comes to Carolina apparently had multiple things on the go. They were negotiating not only with the Avalanche for Mikko Rantanen, but both Vancouver players, JT Miller and Elias Pettersson. They had 3 major negotiations, all ongoing kind of simultaneously, trying to see how things would line up and see what would be the best path for them to go. And they chose, obviously, this Rantanen path with the Avalanche. Now, it's believed in Vancouver, we had heard that they had discussions on, like I said, with Pettersson and Miller, both of them gaining interest from the Hurricanes. The main player from the Hurricanes that the Canucks would want as a starting point in either player for a trade was Marty Necas, and it was believed that they weren't willing to put him in. But yet, for Rantanen, they were. So clearly, they value Rantanen a lot more. Certainly lots of players from Finland on that team, and the big question now is going to be, can they sign Rantanen and keep him there longer term, or is this going to be a rental situation? And I know if it turns out to be a rental situation and they don't win the cup, it could be a big kind of bust move here for the Hurricanes. But if they keep him or they get a cup out of it or both, then certainly it's a major win. And on paper, this trade looks really, really favorable for the Hurricanes, who are the big players here. Also getting Taylor Hall from the Blackhawks. Now, of course, Mikko Rantanen technically went to Carolina through Chicago with them retaining half of his salary. So they got Rantanen and Hall in exchange for giving up multiple 2 picks, a second and a fourth, as well as Jack Drury and Marty Necas. So it's, like I said, massive blockbuster trade. Probably the biggest trade we've seen in season since probably the Jack Eichel trade. We've had other major trades as well, but they tend to happen more often in the summertime and the offseason. Now, of course, word today from Elliot Friedman on his 32 Thoughts podcast was that to watch the Hurricanes, that they were extremely active and busy, and they were trying to get their business done, well ahead of the deadline, well ahead of this Four-Nation face-off break coming up as well. He didn't allude to the fact that they were going after Rantanen. However, he did indicate that, that they were very much involved with the Canucks. But it seemed like if they were going to deal with the Canucks, it was more likely going to be a trade for Pettersson than Miller. I think they were more serious there, but they were considering both players. I know in Chicago as well, Kyle Davidson, the GM, had been seen at some Avalanche games recently. There was some talk that there was more than anything that they were out kind of scouting one of their own prospects and that they just had a break in the schedule. I was like, I'm not so sure about that. I thought, whether it was Taylor Hall, Ryan Donato, or one of these guys was going to be involved in a deal, and I think that they were kind of doing some other scouting, if you will. However, the Avalanche, and the Hurricanes pulled off this deal with Chicago being involved, and Chicago only got a third-round pick out of it. So they could have resulted in Davidson being, very much involved in kind of scouting some other stuff there. So we'll have to see. When it comes to the Canucks, though, and Miller and Pettersson, I know some people are starting to feel that the offers for Miller just aren't good enough, which is why we haven't seen a trade here as of yet. We still keep going back to the fact that it seems like it's going to be the New York Rangers or bust when it comes to Miller. The Avalanche are definitely a team now that you might see make another move. A lot of people think the Avalanche aren't done. So we'll get to them here in a minute as well. But, there's the belief out there when it comes to Vancouver that, it's not just a JT Miller trade to the Rangers or bust here, that they may decide. I know Cam Robinson posted this, and he's pretty well connected, especially with Western teams and the Canucks, where, he's probably more connected that way than anybody else, or any other team, and he feels that there's a possibility that they may have a change of heart here and end up moving Pettersson instead of Miller. Doesn't mean for sure it's going to go down that way, of course. That's just his kind of gut feeling that the offers on Miller haven't been good enough. The team, needs to do something one way or another. And as much as it might seem crazy that they could end up moving both Miller and Pettersson, or maybe Pettersson instead. Maybe Miller stays. There's a possibility depending on how the trade offers kind of work themselves out. But the big question you're going to ask yourself, is Elias Pettersson that number one center that's going to earn that contract he signed? Can they win with Pettersson? Is he that guy? And if they're not sure, and I think based on how things have gone since he signed an extension, they certainly have some doubts and some concerns. And if those concerns are big enough, would they pull that type of deal? But now that the Hurricanes have Rantanen, I think it's fair to say those deals with the Canucks are definitely off the board right now. So, is there other teams that were serious on either player? It didn't seem to be that way, at least based on what was reported. So we'll have to wait and see. But could the Canucks turn their attention more to Pettersson on a trade than Miller? It sure seems like it's a possibility. But the Canucks, I think, have to get down to business and get something taken care of soon. Now, one cryptic tweet, which is not something that is unusual for him, but Kevin Weeks, NHL insider, was posting some things on his Twitter kind of relating to the fact that the Avalanche weren't done and kind of alluding to Pittsburgh. And it got a lot of people speculating on whether or not, could they go after Crosby to reunite him with good buddy Nathan MacKinnon? Well, most Pittsburgh media still insist on the idea and the fact that Crosby has zero desire to be traded. We know Crosby has a full no-move clause, so Crosby's only going to be traded if Crosby wants to be traded. Now, if he ever decided he wanted to be, I would suspect that working with good buddy Nate MacKinnon would be a desirable option, but that's, just a gut instinct on my part. Like I said, most Pittsburgh media who claim to have more knowledge of the situation and know Crosby better seem to think that he will never want to leave Pittsburgh and will be a lifelong Penguin, no matter how frustrating it might be in their results here in his final days and weeks and last couple of years with the organization before he eventually decides to hang him up. But we don't know when that's going to be, of course. But he's still a very competitive guy, and I'm sure it's going to be driving him a little bit crazy that they're not having the success they'd like to have, and they're not been in the playoff picture now for a couple of years, and things are still, trending in a direction to not be in the playoffs for at least another year, and it's going to probably get worse before it gets better. At least that's the way people think right now. But there are multiple other reporters out there as well suggesting could a fellow Nova Scotian buddy of MacKinnon be joining him in Colorado. And, obviously all signs point to people thinking that means Crosby. You have to wonder about the Bruins. Brad Marchand falls in that category as well. They all train together in the summertime. The Nova Scotia boys are all a very tight group, all know each other very well. And if the Bruins do fall out of the race here or decide that they're going to maybe do a little bit of surgery to this roster, because the Bruins are a team to watch. Brad Marchand also a pending UFA, and apparently they've been to some degree in the mix for JT Miller too. I think a little bit lesser than other teams, but they're certainly, interested in trying to get this team back on the rails here and get the season saved. So again, we have no reason to be certain at all that Brad Marchand would be moved. It's just he's not signed. The season's certainly, not going the way the Bruins want. And, I said speculation is starting to really persist out there about what the Avalanche might do next. Now, could it also mean that because they freed up some space, they get a little bit of extra cap space out of this move, and of course they moved a major forward, to get assets back in order to, not lose them for nothing. Is this a return of Gabe Landeskog? It could be the next move for the Avalanche. Or is there any chance that another big name is coming into the Avalanche lineup to join him. I don't know. I mean, I'd be shocked if Crosby was traded and joined MacKinnon, but it's certainly getting lots of attention out there. Like I said, from the Kevin Weeks tweet, and then Paul Bissonnette was jumping on and kind of hyping things up again. And like I said, we have no other reason to suggest or think that it's going to happen, but based on those two, and they are connected people that have knowledge of what might be going on behind the scenes. So when you see that, it does make you stop and think. However, some, connected national reporters like Elliot Friedman and then the local Pittsburgh media have been pretty quick to pour cold water on the concept and thought of Crosby going to the Avalanche. But it's certainly a fun thought. Let me know what you think. Is there any chance, or is this all just a pipe dream and the Avalanche are going to be going in a different direction here? Let me know what you think in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you next time.